edition was last month. We interviewed Robin Anderson for her book, The Complicit Lens, U.S. Media Coverage of Israel's Genocide in Gaza. And next month, we will be interviewing Miko Peled about The General's Son, Journey of an Israeli in Palestine. But today, we'll be talking about Mapping My Return, a Palestinian memoir by Dr. Salman Abu Sitta. Dr. Salman Abu Sitta is a Palestinian academic, best known for his crucial work formulating a practical return plan for Palestinian refugees and documenting Palestine's land and people through his extensive mapping of Palestine. He is the founder and president of the Palestine Land Society, an NGO accredited by the UN CEIRPP. His archival collection and working files of research over 40 years form the backbone of the Palestine Land Studies Center, the PLSC, which he established at the American University of Beirut. He is also the author of over 400 articles and papers on Palestine, as well as several books, notable among them a series of atlases documenting Palestine at different periods. These include Atlas of Palestine 1948, Atlas of Palestine 1917 to 1966, in English, Arabic, Spanish, and Russian editions, Atlas of Palestine from 1871 to 1877, and the Return Journey Atlas, and the Atlas of Palestine Land Theft by the Jewish National Fund. He created also a series of poster maps about the Nakba. More details are in the PLS website at www.plands.org. His book, Mapping My Return, is the first personal memoir in English describing the experience of al-Nakba in southern Palestine. Dr. Abu Sitta is a former member of the Palestine National Council and a member of several organizations dealing with Palestinian rights, human rights, and international law. He spoke at many international fora in Europe, in the USA, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, in addition to the Middle East. And of notable interest is his virtual trial of Lord Balfour, entitled A Palestinian Address to Balfour at the University of Edinburgh in November 2022. He set up an exhibition, Palestine Maps in 2,000 Years, shown in a number of cities. And this is just something I learned from reading the book, is that he is the uncle of the renowned Palestinian surgeon, Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta. So welcome, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Tom, for a somewhat lengthy and very generous introduction. I hope we can stand up to that. And very glad to meet your group, especially when it is, friendly, face-to-face question and answer rather than a lengthy lecture. I welcome the opportunity to speak to you on a friendly basis.
Great, excellent. So someone actually recommended your book to me, and I read it, and I thought it was not just a really impressive memoir, but also just really interesting history lesson and political history lesson, and especially your work with the Palestine Land Society and with the whole concept of mapping return, because I think that is something that is too often overlooked and or offered up as negotiable. When people talk about Palestine, they talk about a two-state solution and all these other silly ideas that neglect this fundamental right to return, which was the earliest UN resolution that, as you mentioned in your book, has been the most reaffirmed resolution in UN history. So yeah, I guess start from wherever you want. Talk about your experience as a child in the Nakba, your uh, having to walk away from your home and not knowing that you may never see it again, and all the work that you have been doing over the years to map your return.
Well, it's our fate as Palestinians. I often think of that. It's almost like as if we were in a small boat thrown into a violent sea, and we have to navigate that into these high waves. We find our way how to survive. Um, we seem to be in Palestine, sort of a line in a big volume of world wars and imperial interests and colonial interests and so on. And we find ourselves in a little boat in a very violent, stormy sea, and we try to survive in that, hoping that this small boat will not capsize and we still find one time our way to the shore. Um, for example, as a child, I remember the First World War. Sorry, the Second World War, not the first. I'm not that old. The Second World War, I could see regiments of Australian soldiers who came to Palestine in the Second World War because Britain was short of soldiers, and they were afraid that the Germans would take over Palestine, so they brought Australian soldiers. And this is the same way, only 10 years later after that, and the Nakba struck, and I tried to describe that in Mapping My Return. And very few years later, 53, then 55, 56, then there was the Suez Campaign, or what we call three-partite aggression. Um, Israel, England, and France attacked us and attacked Egypt, and so on and so forth. In 1967, when I was in my way to Canada to have to take a job as professor in Canada, it came like that, and really, I often wonder, Tom, what did that make of us Palestinians? But all in all, I think it made us strong, courageous, and able to navigate in this rough sea. But we paid a very heavy price for that, a very heavy price. I mean, our existence is doubted. Palestine is often said to be non-existent. And I was wondering, am I now speaking to you from the world of ghosts or real life? Of course, Palestine existed for thousands of years, 4,000, 5,000, and since Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago. And actually, in that time, um, Europe, which is now doubting our presence, was not on the maps before 500 years. I mean, who would hear about Europe before Magellan went around the world or the America discovered in 1492? Nobody would hear about it. But we hear in Palestine, in a small hamlet, a stone which indicates our existence 4,000 years ago. And who is disputing our presence in Palestine? Who is defying and fighting our existence, our right in Palestine? Who's that? Who's that? People who did that are vagabonds who came from Eastern Europe in raft or smuggler ships in Palestine only after Balfour in 1917, and they claim to be the original Palestinians. the owner of this ancient land. And I and my people are newcomers or people who pretend to have a country. I mean, how could you, in this age of knowledge, could present this kind of theme or thesis? How could you do that? The only explanation for me, as a scientist and an engineer, is that the listeners or the believers of this thesis are racist and ignorant. Both a combination of ignorance and racism allows them to condemn other people like us Palestinians to oblivion, to non-existence, in order to allow Ashkenazis who were vomited out of the ghettos of Europe to claim that they are original people of Palestine who decided after 2,000 years to go home. But we never left home. We are, and we lived in our home all this time. So I think it is an affront to the intelligence and knowledge of any decent human being, whatever who they are, to accept this honest theory. I am writing um, a new thesis, not a new thesis, but a new paper. We can really have a history lesson in the place names of Palestinians. One of my students is working on the history of Palestine names, Palestine place names. And you know, even in that simple example, we outdo anywhere, any country in the world, in the authenticity of our history, in the place names. Place names mentioned in our place names, my own place called Sheikh Noran, or it was to be Saint Hilarion Monastery, is mentioned in Eusebius in the year 313. Eusebius is a priest, bishop in Palestine in 313, in Caesarea village, and he wrote Geography of Palestine, and he mentioned places familiar to us in my childhood. So, um, who would be blamed for what happened to us? It's racism, it's ignorance, and it is, of course, embedded into colonialism. But with the knowledge we have today, with the internet, with the media, and so on, how could people fail to understand that? They can only fail to do that because the controllers of the media continue to keep them blind to the truth, continue to mislead them, continue to do that. And I expect that any intelligent person um, should revolt against that and say, I must find the truth. And if they try to do that, they will certainly succeed because it's splashed all over pages of information about Palestine, not least at the United Nations records, or at least in good history books or geography books. So there is no excuse for anyone to avoid or mislocate the truth. One thing I'd like to just conclude, the key to this, the engine to do this, the motor to operate this is your conscience. You must have a conscience for humanity, for truth, and it is a duty to yourself not to be misled by others, but use your humanity and good common sense and search for the truth. And if you seek the truth, you certainly will find it.
Yes, that's very true. Thank you. I just to give you a little idea of where I'm coming from. I'm an American. I was born and raised in America. I have a Catholic family, and I did not know anything about Palestine really until October 7th, 2023. I knew a little bit. I knew, as much as we hear in the American news, which is not a lot. Um, but after October 7th happened, I made a conscious decision to educate myself on the history of the region, um, not least because I knew there was going to be a war, and I wanted to have an informed opinion about what was happening. And it took me 2 weeks of reading and watching YouTube videos and stuff before I identified as an anti-Zionist. Like it was very clear and obvious to me after just a little amount of exposure to the history, what was right and wrong here. And so I wonder, as somebody who has been, putting this, fighting this battle for as long as you have, like, I mean, you must see the sea change that's happening in the world in the last 2.5 years. It's so obvious now to everybody, to most people, like what is happening, and the settler colonial nature of the Zionist project. Um, and yet, the ruling class, like globally, especially in the West, is still fighting really hard to like pretend that Israel is our good friend and ally, and the Palestinians are evil. And how do you see that narrative shifting, and or do you, or like what's your take on that today?
Well, that's a very good question. Because why is Palestine special? Palestine is part of the Arab world, Arab culture, Arab history, Arab geography, which extends from Kuwait of today to Morocco and the West. And it has been a monolithic unit of same people, same history, um, at least for 1400 years of being Arab. And of course, they existed before that. So, why? I mean, if there is no Palestine, then there is no Lebanon, there is no Syria, there is no Egypt. Well, these are geographical names. They could change, they could remain, whatever. But the people on these lands, they did not migrate to or from another place. Um, and I keep saying to people who claim that the Jews of Europe were there and they want to return after 2 years, 2,000 years, I say, but we never left. And there's no record of us leaving. So I have no claim of making trips to or from Palestine. We were in Palestine all the time. Now, then comes the First World War. And in the First World War, the monolithic structure of the one state from was today Iraq to Morocco um, under the Ottoman Empire collapsed. And when it collapsed, why did it collapse? Because Western colonial forces came to the area to dismantle the Ottoman Empire and divide the pieces to themselves. So the French, with agreement with the British, took Syria and Lebanon, an area geographically known Syria and Lebanon, but they defined it separately. And the British took Palestine, Iraq, and Palestine and Transjordan and Iraq. And the British were already in Egypt in 1882. And so the new division started in 1917. And needless to say, that was a treacherous agreement because the Allied forces promised the Arabs when they liberate our area from the Turks, we will be independent. And that was called a promise, the trust of civilization. I quote, trust of civilization, a word or a term which has been floated around in the First World War to tell Arabs, if we together, that's the British and the Arabs, get rid of the Turks in your country, we will allow you, will help you to be free and independent. It's called trust of civilization, a quote used frequently at that period and even documented. Of course, it was treachery because at the very same time, this slogan was banded around. They agreed with rich Jewish Zionists in Europe who have nothing to do with Palestine that when they win, the allies win, they will allow them to have, quote unquote, national home in Palestine. They said national home, not a state, and in Palestine, not of all Palestine. So this is the first page of treachery which took place. And of course, the series never ended till this morning. The treachery is still going on. Now, when people say Palestinians, no, it doesn't exist, well, our maps are very clear. We have 1,200 towns and villages, some of them from the time of Eusebius in 313, and of course, no doubt from Jesus Christ's time. 1,200 towns and villages. Of course, notable among them Jerusalem and Bethlehem, and Nazareth, very well known to many people. Jaffa is even older than that. And so this is our geography, this is our land, 1,200 towns and villages, were very well recorded over the years, and of course shown in our atlases. Now, what happened in 1948, the Western powers allowed Ashkenazi Jews to come from Poland, Russia, and various other places like Ukraine, allowed them to come and smuggle a ship to our shores and help them to form an army. And this army, by the end of the mandate, was about 60,000 soldiers, well trained by the British themselves, to the extent they give them uniforms, not only arms and training. And of course, this army is called the Haganah, took over Palestine. How did they take over Palestine? They were stationed in various parts of Palestine, mostly British camps. They were trained by the British. And then when the British withdrew at the excuse that they have no mandate to stay, they did not do that before they were sure that the new Jewish force, they were called Jewish then later they are Zionist and then Israeli, was able to take over Palestine. And they did. They did. They actually took over and attacked 530 cities and villages in 1948. 530 towns and villages in 1948 by the training and the force and the help of the British. What happened with that? 530 towns and villages were attacked by the new Jewish immigrants, and they were expelled through a number of massacres. Of course, the well-known among them is Deir Yassin, but there is the Waima and many others. We have a list of 95 massacres which have taken place. And without these massacres, people will never leave. They actually either expel them, kill them, or expel them. And on that basis, the Zionist forces occupied 78% of Palestine, 78%, which included 530 depopulated towns and villages. On this land, 78% of Palestine, a new state called Israel was announced. none of those members of the state have been there for more than a few years before. And the army, which is 10 times more than the force Palestinians and the other Arabs able to muster, took over, as I said, through at least 95 massacres. And they then formed what's called Israel. And who supported that? The West. The West created an island for an island in our land. The United States itself was great supporter of that. Truman recognized the new attackers' state 5 minutes after it was announced on 14th of May 1948. Imagine. Of course, that was a plot. That was a plan to take over another country. And then, of course, the refugees have been expelled from their homes. Today, there are 9 million Palestinians out of total 15 million who are refugees expelled from 530,000 villages. 9 million, of which 6 million are registered by the United Nations, by UNRWA, because at that time they had no shelter, no place, no food. They were registered by that. And this event, this Nakba, what we call, or catastrophe, or disaster, took place in 1948. We count it by the days. It's now 28,500 days since the Nakba. I am a refugee for this period of time. Although I managed to live and in certain ways prosper, but I have never forgotten my right to return home. And all my atlases are based on that. All my plans as a demographer and as planner and an engineer, the plans I worked is how to return home. Returning home, of course, is supported by international law. Thousands of resolutions supported that. Yet the West, which created Israel, never allowed the international law to apply. And in the plans I made, I have shown that the return is feasible. We know exactly where we're from and where we can go back to and how we build our country back again. 10 years ago, I found competition among young Palestinian architects making their graduation project for to earn a degree in architecture. Their project should be to reconstruct one of the villages of Palestine. And now we are in the 10th year of this competition. The results are starting. We have 330 young Palestinian architects went through this exercise as their graduation project. They, so far, managed to prepare complete plans for the reconstruction of 55 or 60 villages in Palestine in modern architectural plan, ready to be executed or built tomorrow. And it is quite feasible in every possible way, including the cost of that, including the labor and the engineers. We can do it. We have the labor. We have the engineers. We can do it. And international law for 130 times emphasized or affirmed the right of return of Palestinians. So we have international law repeated 130 times. We know where to go back. We know where we can build and how to build our homes again, but we are stopped from doing that. Why is that? Because the United States, England, and Germany in particular, we want to have this dagger in our heart and to create a colony for the West in the midst of our historical land. And that crime remains to be punished.
Yeah, one of the things that really jumped out to me when I read your book was when you said, I don't remember what the exact statistics were, but you said something about how the Jews are only living in like 20% of the territory that they captured and confiscated from Palestinians in the Nakba, and that there's like many of the villages that were evacuated and destroyed are just vacant land now, and nobody's living there. Um, so we have a question. Somebody asked, uh, "How do you envision the practical return of refugees to Palestine? Like, what is the day one after liberation like for a Palestinian refugee?"
Well, thank you for this. Let me pick up the last sentence you made. 88% of land held by Israel of Palestine is still vacant today. I would say even the inhabited part by Israelis of Palestine uh, could be even less than 12%. If you take the urban areas, actually, it will be even 6% of Palestine. So I have it in detail in maps that the great majority of Palestinian refugees can return without even being felt by the present Israeli settlers in our land. The only people who control the land of the Palestinian refugees are the kibbutz. And the kibbutz, in number, they are many, about 800 or even 900 kibbutz. They are planted on the land of Palestinian refugees in order to prevent their return. But their number as population, the kibbutz population, is anywhere from 10 to maybe even 5%. But not only this number is very small, but they work in agriculture using our land as a culture, but it produces only 1% of Israel GDP. So if they lose that income from our land, Israelis, it will hardly affect them in any way. But at the same time, the land of all the refugees will be returned. So, in terms of logistics and demography and all that, the return is not, we agreed it is legal, we agreed historically it's correct, but also it's very feasible. And let us remember one thing. The Jews of Israel maintain their ways of life as they did in Europe. No change. What does that mean? They are mostly urban and they are mostly working with economy, with trade, with all that. And this requires city life, urban life, as they do today. So, as I said, 90% of Jews today are in Jaffa, Haifa, and few other towns like that. If they evacuate, and I made a detailed study, evacuate the land of refugees, we can take the kibbutz population in buses in 7 days back to Tel Aviv, and they will evacuate the land of all the refugees. And these kibbutz settlers will find accommodation easily without even impact on the Jews who are living in Palestinian cities, now Israeli cities like Jaffa and Haifa. So there is no problem with that. No political problem, no legal problem. Political problem there is, but no no logistic problem, no geographical problem, certainly no legal problem. Now, my question always in my mind, how long could the West continue to support the crime of displacing Palestinians and planting Israel in Palestine? I heard something only recently on TV, but it is supported by Biden, the previous president of the United States. He said something which is very informative. If we don't have Israel, we have to invent one. What does that mean? They want to plant Israel in the heart of the Arab world to be a huge military base to support their colonial projects. So it is an act of aggression, and it is a hostile element in the midst of the Arab world. And therefore, there is a war against Arabs, and in particular Palestinians, by the West, and in full determination, and the support they give there is like the support they give to any military base or any act of aggression. Now, how long this set will continue? I doubt it will continue for a long time, although it may take a long time, because similar projects in the past have failed. For example, Hong Kong was a well-established British colony in China land. They did not survive. The Portuguese established in the middle of India a colony for 300 years. It did not survive. You could not have a foreign body inside a homogeneous ocean. You can support it by force, by killing, by disaster, by massacres, but this by itself has a limited life. And I hope the end of this project and the return of Palestinians to their homes would take sooner rather than later. It is a disgrace for the human history that this can happen today with this knowledge and the information we have and the public opinion of the world. And I feel a great relief or some kind of comfort when I see school children in many countries around the world go to the street in support of Gaza and against its genocide. So there is hope. We never lose hope, and we have no. I have no doubt that truth will prevail in the end, and justice will be restored.
Yeah. Another question that came in, many young Palestinians have inherited exile rather than experiencing Palestine directly as it was before 1948. How can Palestinians in exile build a relationship with Palestine?
Again, thank you for this question. I hope with it I could have answered what you have in mind. The answer to this is in my daughters. I have two daughters. They are born in Canada. They have never seen Palestine. No, a correction. I took one of them to visit Palestine because we have foreign passports. And one of them saw my birthplace, Al Main, for the first time. Let me tell you something, which is, of course, expected. We have the trauma of being refugees because we were citizens and then we became refugees. But my daughters, for example, they were born in Canada and they were born as Canadian citizens and they went to school and all that. So they only know about the trauma from me and their mother. Of course, over the years, they absorb this, and they know that this is their right. And why should my daughters be born abroad when my family has a family history of 12 generations, and they are the first generation to be born outside Al Ma'in in Palestine? Why should we, the odd uh, generation in the history of our family? And they are, of course, very angry about that. And they do their way as young people in writing, in community work, and various other things like that. And so their children, now I am grandfather, of course, um, and um, this is conveyed to them. My children and my grandchildren know Palestine by heart, and they know the map, and they can put their finger on our land, and so on. So the battle goes on, and it takes different forms, and the soldiers in it are one generation after another, and the subject is the same. Subject is the same, and it's human subject, to return home, to return home. That is our home, our aim, and that is what we all work for. And I'm sure our work and what we write and we tell people will, in the end, succeed in doing something so basic, so human, so elementary, to return home. And if I return home, I'm doing something which is the right of every human being to be. And it is against Ashkenazi coming from the hovels of Europe on a smuggler ship claiming my own home. I made an inquiry about the people in Nerim kibbutz, which is right on the land of my father and mine, out of 4 kibbutz in our land. And I was wondering how these people who came from Poland or somewhere else unknown claim the right to live in my home, and I cannot do that. And if I'm in Gaza, as I was frequently, I would be there 2 kilometers away from my home, separated by barbed wires and machine guns. How could history accept that? It will never be, neither will we, and I'm sure we'll return. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, of course. So we did start 20 minutes late. So if you have time, we can go 20 minutes longer, or if you would rather, if you have a hard stop.
I would rather not, because for a technical reason, I'm speaking to you, not in my office, but using my mobile, and the battery now is flashing.
Okay.
Really, really, it's a conspiracy, probably, but but it just came.
Okay.
And thank you very, very much, Tim. Uh, I would appreciate if you have a record of that to let me know.
Okay, absolutely. Will do. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Sitta.
Thank you. Let us remain in touch. You have my email, and we can communicate further.